Welcome to Nature of Sovereignty. Today I sit down with Kal Kassa, Head of Business Development in Africa for Hosekiapp, a new Bitcoin company building infrastructure for a Bitcoin standard. Kal has launched many grassroots work in education and Bitcoin adoption in his home country of Ethiopia. So we discuss those prospects, the opportunities that exist in Africa, specifically mining, learning that 90% of Ethiopia's electricity is currently powered by hydroelectric plants. So the opportunity is clearly there. We get into the likelihood of legislation being passed, how to incentivize regulators, and much more. Kal is a true crusader for his home country, and I'm excited for the future prospects of Ethiopia. Enjoy. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Ian. It's a pleasure to be on, and thank you for having me on such an important platform. And I'm definitely a big fan of your work and your content, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So actually, let's talk a little bit about Hosekiapp. Tell me a little about it.
Sure. So I can't tell you too much. We're still in stealth mode, but Hoseki is a platform for empowering people through Bitcoin ownership. So in the coming few weeks, months, we'll kind of release more information about the product and service offerings, but you guys can go online into our website, hoseki.app, and learn more.
Great. I first heard about you from John Crabtree from Changing Tide in that podcast, and then also you did it with CK Snark for Bitcoin Magazine about the overall adoption of Bitcoin in Ethiopia. And for Black Bitcoin billionaires, we're definitely invested in Africa, the continent as a whole. Having Ray Youssef on from Paxful, Abu Bakr Khalil. He works as a Bitcoin contributor, and it seems like there is this energy that's coming from Africa, whether it's young, it's youthful, and they're entrepreneurial, and they're looking to new technology and working on that and building on that. So Ethiopia being one of those places as well that's developing, I was like, man, I have to have you here so I can learn about the development of Bitcoin in Ethiopia. So overall, what's the sentiment of Bitcoin? Is there as much knowledge there? How many people know about it? Is foreign? Is people scared about it? What's the overall mood?
Sure. So we're still new. I think the way I look at Ethiopia in terms of kind of the greater picture of Africa is, we're still the little brother compared to the giants of Nigeria, compared to what Ray Youssef has been able to do, Abu Bakr and Bernard, and I think you interviewed Olalu at some point from Lightning Labs. So these are the Africans in the African diaspora that have been able to really put Nigeria on the map, right? So the Ethiopia perspective is one of, I think, a little bit of envy, right? And looking at these great, countries and great leaders and saying, how can Ethiopians be a part of this, community, be a part of this, financial revolution? So, we're still in early phases of learning. A lot of my time, definitely at Bitcoin Birr, where I've been doing open source Bitcoin education, and now at Hoseki with my business development role, it'll be in teaching about Bitcoin. What is it? How can it be used as an alternative to the currencies we have in place? And then how can it be used as a standard? And so, right now we're working on translations of various Bitcoin books and materials. The Little Bitcoin book by Jimmy Song and Alex Gladstein and some of those OGs has been translated into Amharic, which is a major language in kind of the Ethiopian country. And then just last week we translated it into Tigrinya. And I credit Maron. I think she's somewhere in Norway. So I credit her with spending time on that translation. And then the third we'll be working on is Afan Oromo. And so once we have these three languages, we'll have those books available for free at littlebitcoinbook.com. And you're able to download the PDF, and that gives 100 million people in East Africa access to Bitcoin knowledge. And then from there, we want to keep doing what West Africa has been able to do, and that's contribute to kind of the development scene, the protocol, and then move into kind of the different regulations and laws that will enable us to use this as a legal tender.
Wow. And you said it's over 100 million citizens?
Correct. Yeah.
In
So
Ethiopia?
I think Ethiopian populace is about 110 as of now, and then you have Eritrea. They speak the Tigrinya language, and so when you add them, and then if you have all of the Ethiopians in diaspora, so it's a big number. And so we actually have about 80 languages in Ethiopia, but for the sakes of my sanity, I'm focusing on the first three.
Okay. Yeah, the top three.
Yeah.
Wow. So for actually about Bitcoin Birr, that's interesting. So that's the open source education platform that you've been a part of. Could you explain a little bit about Bitcoin Birr and really the big takeaways that people who go there and learn the content, what they get from that?
Sure. So the learning is, can you operate a Bitcoin wallet? So if you're able to send a transaction of 200 sats and then receive a transaction of 200 sats, you've graduated. So that's
Right.
the
Get your certificate.
yeah, that's if you can do that, you're much better off than you were. And then from there we move into what is money, how does the protocol work, and then kind of comparing that through currencies and money types through different histories, and then how this could empower people throughout Africa. So it's and the intent was really to make it open source because I think you've seen this in the space as well. Often when you have those conversations on Clubhouse and whatnot, they turn into kind of a sales funnel, right? And they turn into someone marketing a product or a service, or they start charging you money for education that I really feel and believe that should be free. So the idea is any translations that we do, they're available on Google Drive as a simple Word document. And if there are any disagreements as to what the translation should be, a lot of times we're even kind of creating new words, right? Because a blockchain and all of these things are completely new concepts for East Africans. So making it open source really removes the kind of profitability equation out of everything, and it allows us to purely give and to spend our time teaching. And thankfully we've had some great supporters, so this has been viable for us. But it's to have Bitcoin centric, Bitcoin only education done in an open source manner, and it's been received very well. We've had a great deal of feedback. We're being hosted on several different websites. I think we've even received some interest to get the audiobook up. So I have different volunteers now that are recording their voice and sending that out through Telegram groups and such. So it's been a very kind of small effort on my part, but the community as a whole has taken it and has built something that I'm really proud of.
Right. And I assume that one of the big takeaways when learning about Bitcoin is that is a great hedge against inflation. And I was looking in Ethiopia. I'm not sure if these numbers still stand. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a 20% is of inflation rate
It is. Yeah.
in Ethiopia right now. So I guess one of my questions is, what are some assets that they're using in Ethiopia to help preserve their wealth? Is it Bitcoin? Is it other things?
Sure.
What are they using?
So I think in 2020, the IMF came out with that number that said CPI grew at consumer price index grew at 20%. In 2021, that number actually became 25%. Wow. So that's the inflation rate that we're battling now. And also, we should be aware that oftentimes when the IMF and whatnot are coming up with these numbers, they get to choose what's in the basket, right? They get to choose what's in the consumer's household, right?
Consumer goods.
And so often that might not be a reflection of someone's actual expenses in the economy. So my estimate is that those numbers are probably a little misleading, and that they're actually greater. In terms of how do Ethiopians at present protect themselves from inflation, it's a very difficult conversation because our capital markets are so closed. Ethiopians, I'm fortunate, I'm a diaspora, I'm able to travel and all of this, but for those that are, for lack of better words, stuck in the Ethiopian economy, they have no access to US dollar, and Bitcoin ownership is currently illegal in Ethiopia. So unfortunately, there isn't an easy way to hedge against that inflation. At present, those that can afford it by property, that seems to kind of stay on par with at least the dollar. And then, those that are a little bit more brave and their kind of custody, they might take ownership of gold and then, put that in a safe somewhere. But you're right, there really is, very little reason to hold the Ethiopian birr, purely because it devalues at 20 to 30% a year. So we have to be aggressively creative in how to without evading the law, right? Without doing anything illegal, protect our value as Ethiopians.
And that was one of my questions next about politicians and their take on Bitcoin, but you kind of answered it right here. So you're saying it's illegal. Now, explain a little bit of the legality over it. So is it illegal to buy? Is it illegal to receive? Let's say if I didn't buy any Bitcoin myself, but I received some from a friend from the United States.
Sure.
What's the legality around that?
So, and a lot of those details I'll be able to answer in about 3 weeks when I head to Ethiopia myself, and I'll be doing
test it out yourself.
I'll be testing out myself.
Like, you guys will know if I'm in jail or not. No,
exactly.
I'm playing with you. No.
But we are on the cusp of where is the law, and because this is such an innovative technology, what happens to a 500 sat transaction, right? Do I have to declare that? Are there taxes involved? And is that legal or not? So at present, owning anything outside of the Ethiopian currency is illegal unless you have the licenses or the LC from the banks and the regulators. So I want to make that very clear. But and partly that's why I've been focusing on education, right? So so starting from education and moving into the different exchanges would be the proper route. How do the regulators feel about this? There is interest. I mean, I've been able to have some conversations with regulators in the space in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, I also feel like there's a bit of a corruption of the conversation with some for lack of a better word, shit coins, right? So, they've been able to enter Ethiopia. They've been able to kind of make some promises, and unfortunately, that doesn't come from a decentralized open source perspective. There's always a little bit of kind of a private gain that happens there. So the conversation has been muddied, and so now I think the responsibility of Bitcoiners is to really kind of segregate those conversations and say, what are we talking about, right? Are we talking about the local currency? Are we talking about stable coins? Are we talking about, these altcoins, right? Or are we talking about Bitcoin? And then
let's actually talk about that, because I know that you wrote an article, right, for Bitcoin Magazine. And, hey, we don't have to skirt around it, talking about Cardano. And they put a lot of resources, and they have like a big presence in Ethiopia, but I'm not sure how much of their issuance was pre-mined, and and they have a system where there's no fixed supply, and only a few of the arbiters can decide where the monetary policy goes. So it is still reflecting the legacy system in terms of monetary policy. And you brought that up. How is the altcoin conversation continuing in Ethiopia? Are people still open to that? Has people, let's say regulators, they see the ills of having a centralized altcoin monetary system? What's their education around that?
Sure. So we have to understand that Cardano entered Ethiopia in 2018. So at that time, I was kind of brand new to the space. I knew very little. I think I can speak for most of kind of my community. We didn't know too much about the space, and during that time, I would say that Cardano hasn't done much. And even in terms of their presence, they only have about 3 or 4 staff in Ethiopia who were working for them full time. So beyond kind of this kind of marketing appeal and a few MOUs, memorandums of understandings with government offices, there's very little implementation that's happening. And the promise was to put the kind of the Ethiopian identity or ID cards onto a blockchain, capture that data, and then be able to kind of track students through an educational kind of upbringing as they're going through K through 12, and then after that track them through their careers. So that was the promise back in 2018, right? And so at that time you might have given them the benefit of the doubt, right? But it's now 2021, we're almost at 2022, and again there's nothing tangible that Ethiopians can speak to. In the meantime, local Ethiopians have been building some really amazing technologies, have developed digital IDs on their own, and have launched that on their own. So, I look at that entire conversation as one that we were having in 2018, maybe 2019. That was a question. I think today, with all that's happened in terms of kind of the value that Bitcoin has brought to kind of the greater world, the kind of ferocity of West Africa adopting this, and again governments weren't involved, right? It was purely the people and the populace saying, look, we need something better. And then looking at El Salvador, right, and this tiny nation being able to create an entire law and move it into legal tender, I think that in itself proves the case. So Bitcoin has been able to kind of advance, and so I'll know in 3 weeks, right, when I head out there and I
Yeah,
start
we're going
having
to
these
need an update for
conversations.
sure.
I'll give you that update for sure. But yeah, so it's a work in progress. People are at different levels of education, so I'm having all types of conversations, but I think for the most part the adoption in Ethiopia is going well, and I look forward to reporting some good news in the weeks to come.
Now, with the regulators as well, I'm thinking about ways of how to further incentivize, right, the Bitcoin adoption. And my mind goes to mining, right? You guys have such a wealth of energy in Ethiopia. I was reading that 90% of the electricity comes from hydroelectric plants,
That's
right?
right.
So that's almost like free energy that's coming through, and a way to funnel that and channel that into Bitcoin mines is like you're making a money printer, basically a Bitcoin printer of free energy and Bitcoin. So has anybody sort of considered that avenue of Bitcoin mining?
Absolutely. So, I'm speaking to different miners throughout the world that are interested in Ethiopia, because they've read the same statistics that we have, which is to say, Ethiopia has kind of aggressively been investing in renewable energy, right? However, that's kind of defined in this new world, and so Ethiopia has been building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Several $billions have gone into this dam. It is now complete. It's being filled up with water. I think the generators are being installed, and so that will be able to, harness the Nile, which starts in Ethiopia and then flows to Egypt. That will be able to harness a great deal of energy and provide Ethiopians with very cheap energy. And I think right now, after different subsidies, it comes out to about 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very attractive for the miners operating throughout the world. And so this will be a big conversation going forward. I expect that they will be sending proposals for how the investment will work, how the custody will work, and then the different guarantees to that energy. And I'm assuming they'll want to be as close to the dam as possible, just so there's not any leakage during the transmission of the energy. But this is a conversation of its own, right? I've been focusing more on the value proposition of how does this fight for inflation, but for kind of the individual person. But in terms of mining, I mean, being able to take water, turn that into energy, and then turn that into the hardest money that is an amazing proposition. So I expect to see several proposals, tenders, procurement announcements coming in from the miners that we know and love in the West, going into Ethiopia. The minimum investment in Ethiopia for FDI or foreign direct investor is $200,000 to $400,000. And for many miners, that's that's affordable, right? So being able to channel that capital into some hardware, into some land, and build around that, and create an entire economy now that wasn't there before, I think is a huge opportunity. And yeah, I encourage any miners to really look into Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is very accepting of investment. As most developing countries are, but working with the Ethiopian Investment Commission, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, these are going to be kind of your three gateways into the economy. And like I said, $200,000 to $400,000 is kind of the minimum investment required for a foreigner to operate in Ethiopia. And so I look forward to seeing all of those investments take place. Talk to any of these kind of Bitcoin companies and Bitcoin developers, and the hardest part of their job is finding developers and programmers that understand the Lightning environment, right? So there's kind of a mad rush for to employ the ones that exist, and then there aren't anymore, right? So the supply of them is dwindling, and there's a great deal of demand. So what I've seen, and Fode is kind of a great credit to that. He's been working to kind of ensure that the education gets kind of spread out to populations that have been underserved. And I'd also like to credit Bernard and Jonas and the people at Kala.dev. And so what I hope to see in the next application round, right? I think their application round ended about 2-3 months ago. So going forward, I'd like to see a lot more Ethiopians apply into that community. And so, as we see that naturally progress, I think we'll have more developers understand Bitcoin, understand Lightning, and then we can kind of get involved in kind of the meat of it all.
Awesome. Well, man, I'm looking forward to you, Kyle. The next couple of weeks, I know you'll bring back some good news for us, and just get an overall take of being in Ethiopia and taking in the environment and just checking the pulse, because this is all growing. It's interesting because this is a global initiative, and different countries are moving at different paces, but we're all starting to get the same information around the same time. So we can have conversations here in America, talk to people in Nigeria, talk to people in Ethiopia, Tonga, Norway, and now we're sort of coalescing this collective mind around Bitcoin, and it's making more sense to more people. I want to get your sort of last takeaways of your hope for Ethiopia in the future when it comes to Bitcoin. What does that vision look like?
Sure. So I think the vision, I think you've kind of outlined it very well. It starts with education. I think we really need to know what is Bitcoin, and I think a predecessor to that question is, what is money? And so once you start asking yourself those questions of, how, gold has been a predecessor for so long, and how gold has failed us, right? And has created so many struggles and war throughout our histories, we then have kind of an awakening towards something that's a little bit more innovative and that is a little bit more hard, right? And so I say this as much as possible, but learning is probably the best thing that we can do. And then from there, where does our future go? I really want to see Ethiopians be a part of the new global economy. So that means transactions that are instant, transactions that are free or almost free, and an Ethiopian living in Ethiopia can contribute to the world in however he or she can, and be paid as per global or international rates. And so it's quite upsetting to see that a lot of Ethiopians that we consider bright or leaders or kind of professionals in this space migrate, leave Ethiopia, right? And that's a consistent drain that's been happening for the past 50 years, because of this communist party or this upset or this civil kind of unrest. You have populations of Ethiopians throughout time leave their home country, and of course that doesn't serve us very well. My family is definitely a part of that too. And so, I'm definitely one to blame in all of this. But, I'd like to see a future where Ethiopians are incentivized to stay home and contribute, where they'll be paid, equal value to someone working in Austin or San Jose or Miami. So, that's really my intention in all of this. How does this, fare for, state reserves and sovereign wealth funds and all of this? That's a great question, right? And miners will kind of naturally lead us into that. But my kind of angle in all of this is working with people, right? Everyday people that are looking to finance an education, finance a car, finance a mortgage, and move on with their lives, right? And have their value stay still, right? Not be continually debased. And I think Bitcoin is the best alternative to all of the systems that we've seen fail us in the past. I think there are communities all over the world. BBB has done a really great job in highlighting that. It's easy to overlook kind of the importance of that. Often we kind of look at Bitcoin from an investment standpoint and from a speculation of number go up, but the people go up, and the billions and not billionaires narrative I think is uber important. And so that's kind of my drive in all of this, to see the education take root, to see our developers blossom into working professionals, and then we'll take it from there.
Awesome. I'm bullish on you. I'm bullish on Ethiopia. I'm ready to go now. Now I got to visit.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. I think next in line is all the great communities that have been developed in the West. Building that bit dev community in Addis Ababa. I think will be one. I'll be taking copies of the Bitcoin standard, to give out to different ministers and state ministers, and shake hands and kind of give Bitcoin a face, right? Because it's such a decentralized open source thing. It's kind of it's difficult to make tangible. So I'm excited to kind of show up in person, and I'm a big believer in doing things in real life. So I'll be shaking some hands and hopefully progressing this thing forward.
Sure. Now, if there's anybody who wants to get connected to your initiatives, also the Hosekiapp that's coming out in a couple of weeks, where can they reach you?
Sure. So if you're interested in kind of the open education, bitcoinbirr.org. That's kind of where I've been hosting all of my open source education, all of kind of the media presence that I've had throughout the region. And then Hoseki, it's hoseki.app, HOSEKI.app. And there, sign up. I'm sure we'll have, kind of content come out as we, release our product. We're still in stealth mode, so you might not see a lot, but we do have a Twitter presence. And so you can follow, some of our leaders.
For sure. And once that goes up, we'll make sure we'll tag it and promote your work, because what you're doing is incredibly, incredibly important for Ethiopia and just the continent of Africa, because we need all the countries in Africa to get in while it's early, while you can really make an impact. And that's what you're doing in Ethiopia right now. So I really appreciate the work that you do.
No, I appreciate you, Ian. And one of the kind of my first mentors in the space, whether he knows it or not, was Lamar, right? So
Yeah, the homie,
being
all of ours, man. I call him
be,
Sensei. That's
yeah,
Sensei right
being and
there.
his patience and love for the people in this space, right? I mean, his patience is really virtue there. I'm a bit of a hothead, right? I mean, as soon as I kind of enter rooms and there are arguments and whatnot, I'm a bit dynamic in that. But he is a sensei, as you said, and the way he's been able to teach, I think, has inspired me. And so I look forward to bringing that energy into Ethiopia, into greater Africa, and keeping it pushing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Ian.